Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Mara Ellis. She thought the silver tray in her hands was the only thing they wanted from her that evening. She was wrong. The Castellano mansion glittered under a winter sky, its marble floors polished so bright they caught the reflection of every chandelier above. Servants moved silently through the halls. Florists arranged white roses in crystal vases. Violinists tuned their strings in the ballroom, where New York's richest men and cruelest women would soon gather under one roof. And in the middle of it all stood Mara Ellis, the Black Maid no one noticed unless something needed cleaning. Her hands smelled faintly of lemon soap. Her black uniform had been pressed twice that morning. A thin white apron was tied around her waist, neat enough to satisfy the head housekeeper, plain enough to remind everyone where she belonged. At least, that was what Alicia Castellano believed. Alicia stood near the grand staircase, dressed in a champagne silk robe, surrounded by three women whose diamonds flashed every time they lifted their glasses. She was the wife of Dante Castellano, the most feared mafia boss in the city. To strangers, Alicia looked elegant. To the staff, she was something sharper. She didn't shout. She smiled. That was worse. Mara, Alicia called, her voice sweet enough to poison tea. Mara stopped near the doorway, silver tray balanced carefully in both hands. Yes, Mrs. Castellano. The women around Alicia turned to look at her, not with curiosity, with amusement, like children watching someone walk into a trap they had built themselves. Alicia lifted a gold envelope from the table beside her. I almost forgot, she said, stepping closer. You're invited tonight. Mara blinked once. For a moment, the mansion seemed to lose sound. The violin strings faded. The footsteps in the hall softened. Even the ice in the champagne bucket stopped cracking. I'm sorry, Mara asked quietly. Alicia smiled wider and placed the envelope on Mara's tray, right beside the empty crystal glasses. To the party. You worked so hard in this house. I thought it would be generous to let you experience how we live for one night. One of Alicia's friends covered her mouth, pretending to hide a laugh. Another whispered, How charitable. Mara looked down at the envelope. Her name had been written in black ink. Miss Mara Ellis. Not staff. Not maid. Her name. And somehow that made it feel even crueler. Alicia leaned in just close enough that only Mara could hear her next words. Don't worry. We found something for you to wear. Something appropriate. Behind her, the women laughed again. Soft. Polished. Expensive. Mara understood then. This was not kindness. This was a stage. Alicia wanted her inside the ballroom, under the chandeliers, surrounded by women in couture gowns and men in tailored suits. She wanted every guest to see the maid pretending, for one night, that she belonged among them. Mara's fingers tightened around the tray. Not enough to shake it. Just enough to remind herself she was still standing. Thank you, Mrs. Castellano, she said. Alicia tilted her head, disappointed that Mara had not lowered her eyes fast enough. Oh, don't thank me yet, she said. Tonight might change how you see yourself. Mara finally looked up. Her eyes were calm. No, she said softly. I don't think it will. For the first time, Alicia's smile faltered. Only for a second. Then she laughed, turning back to her friends as if Mara had said something adorable. See? She has spirit. This will be fun. Mara picked up the envelope from the tray and held it against her chest. She said nothing more. She simply turned and walked back toward the servants' corridor, each step measured, each breath controlled. But as she disappeared from the golden light of the hallway, no one saw her face change. No one saw the old pain rising behind her eyes. And no one knew that in a small locked trunk beneath Mara's bed lay a black velvet box that had not been opened in 7 years. Inside it was a dress. Not borrowed. Not stolen. Not pretend. A dress worth more than every cruel laugh in that room. And by midnight, Alicia Castellano would learn that humiliation is a dangerous game, especially when you invite the wrong woman to play. The room would go silent. Mara Ellis had learned a long time ago that rich houses had two kinds of silence. The first was peaceful, the kind that lived in libraries, behind velvet curtains and locked wine cellars. The second was cruel. It was the silence that came after someone insulted you, and everyone pretended not to hear. For almost 2 years, Mara had worked inside the Castellano mansion, moving through rooms that cost more than the apartment building she lived in. She woke before sunrise, took 2 buses across the city, entered through the side gate, and tied on the same white apron before the family had even opened their eyes. She polished silver that would never touch her table. She folded linen napkins for guests who never learned her name. She wiped fingerprints from mirrors where women like Alicia admired themselves and never once saw the woman cleaning behind them. To the outside world, the mansion was beautiful. To Mara, it was a museum of things people valued more than kindness. Still, she did her work well. Not because she was afraid of Alicia. Not because she believed obedience made her small. But because Mara's mother had taught her that dignity was not something people gave you. It was something you carried, even when no one clapped for it. Every morning, she arrived in a plain coat with worn cuffs. Every evening, she left with tired feet and steady eyes. She sent money to her younger brother in Atlanta, paid for her aunt's medicine, and saved every extra dollar in an old cookie tin hidden beneath her kitchen sink. No one in the Castellano house knew any of that. They only saw the uniform. They only saw the hands. And Alicia saw even less. Careful with that, Alicia would say when Mara carried crystal glasses, as if Mara's touch could lower their value. Not that towel, she would snap from across the kitchen. Use the cheaper one. You people waste things because you never had them. Sometimes the words were soft. Sometimes they came wrapped in smiles. But Mara remembered each one. She did not answer back. She did not give Alicia the satisfaction of seeing her break. She simply lowered her gaze, finished the task, and let the insult fall somewhere behind her ribs, where old wounds knew how to make room. But there was one thing Alicia never understood. Mara had not always cleaned other people's gowns. Once, she had helped create them. Years before the mansion, before the apron, before the buses in the cold, Mara had worked in Paris under Madame Celeste Moreau, one of the last great designers who still believed a dress should be built like a secret. Mara had been young then, barely 22. Quiet, careful, brilliant with her hands. Celeste noticed what others missed. The way Mara could repair lace without leaving a scar, the way she could match thread by touch, the way she understood fabric the way musicians understood sound. You don't sew, child, Celeste had told her once, standing beneath the yellow lamps of the atelier. You listen. For 4 years, Mara listened. She listened to silk sliding across wooden tables, to scissors cutting through satin, to old women in pearl necklaces whispering that a black girl had no place near couture. Celeste heard them too, and every time, she would look at Mara and say, "Stand straighter." Then Celeste died. The fashion house changed hands. Investors came. New directors smiled with cold teeth. Mara was pushed out quietly, politely, professionally. They called it restructuring. She called it what it was. Erasure. A month later, a package arrived at Mara's tiny apartment. A black velvet box. Inside was the final gown Celeste Moreau had ever made. A dress never shown, never sold, never touched by the public. Beneath it was a handwritten note. For Mara, because one day, they will need to see what I saw. Mara had not opened the box in 7 years. Not when she lost her job. Not when she took cleaning work. Not when Alicia called her invisible with every glance. But now, standing in the servants' corridor with Alicia's gold invitation pressed against her palm, Mara felt something old wake up inside her. Not pride. Not anger. Something quieter. The memory of Celeste's voice. Stand straighter. Mara reached her small room behind the kitchen and locked the door. For a long moment, she just stood there, listening to the distant laughter from the grand staircase. Then she knelt beside her bed. Her fingers found the old trunk. The lock clicked open, and the past breathed again. The trunk opened with a sound so small it felt almost disrespectful. Mara froze. For 7 years, that old brass lock had guarded more than fabric. It had guarded a version of herself she had been too tired to remember. The young woman in Paris who used to walk beneath atelier lights with pins between her lips. The woman Madame Celeste had trusted with silk worth more than rent, with lace older than countries, with secrets stitched into seams. But before Mara could lift the velvet box, someone knocked on her door. 3 sharp taps. Not the knock of another servant. The knock of someone who believed every door in the house belonged to her. Mara closed the trunk halfway and stood. When she opened the door, Alicia Castellano was waiting with 2 assistants behind her. One carried a garment bag. The other held a shoe box like it contained evidence. Alicia's eyes moved past Mara into the tiny room. Bare walls, narrow bed, one lamp, one chair. Her mouth curved. How charming, she said. I always wondered where they put you. Mara stepped slightly forward, blocking the view. Did you need something, Mrs. Castellano? Alicia smiled as if the answer were obvious. I brought your outfit for tonight. The assistant unzipped the garment bag. Inside hung a dull gray dress. It was not vintage. It was not elegant. It was simply old. The fabric had lost its shape. One sleeve sat lower than the other. Small beads clung to the neckline like they were embarrassed to still be there. Alicia touched the dress with 2 fingers. I found it in storage. I thought it would be perfect. Behind her, one assistant looked down, uncomfortable. The other smirked. Mara stared at the dress. She did not move. Alicia's voice sharpened beneath the sweetness. You do understand this is generous, don't you? Most employers wouldn't invite staff at all. I understand, Mara said. Good. Alicia pushed the dress toward her. Then wear this. And don't worry about fitting in. Nobody will expect that from you. The words landed quietly. That was Alicia's talent. She never threw stones. She wrapped them in silk first. Mara accepted the dress. The fabric felt tired in her hands. Alicia leaned closer, lowering her voice. Tonight, important people will be here. Investors, judges, men who decide things, women who remember everything. So please don't embarrass my husband by pretending you're something you're not. Mara looked at her. Alicia's smile thinned. What? She asked. Nothing, Mara said. But there was something in Mara's silence that made the narrow room feel colder. Alicia hated it. She had expected gratitude. Or fear. Maybe even tears. She had imagined Mara taking the dress with trembling hands, whispering thank you, then appearing later in the ballroom like a sad little joke Alicia could offer her guests between champagne and dessert. But Mara did none of that. She simply held the dress. Steady. Alicia turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. One more thing, she said. Use the back staircase when you come down. I'll call you when everyone is ready. Everyone is ready. Ready to laugh. Ready to watch. Ready to measure her worth by the fabric on her body. Mara nodded once. Alicia left, her perfume lingering behind like smoke after a candle is blown out. For a long moment, Mara stood alone with the gray dress in her arms. Then, slowly, she laid it across the bed. She did not hate the dress. The dress had done nothing wrong. It was only cloth, pulled into cruelty by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Mara touched the broken seam near the waist. Her fingers moved automatically, trained by memory. She could fix it. She could make it wearable. She could show up in that old gray thing with dignity and still survive the night. But survival was not the same as living. From the ballroom below, laughter rose through the vents. Alicia's laughter. Mara turned back to the trunk. This time, she opened it all the way. The black velvet box waited inside. Quiet. Patient. Like it had known this night would come. Mara knelt. And with both hands, she lifted the past into the light. The velvet box was heavier than Mara remembered. Not because of the dress. Because of everything buried with it. She placed it on the bed beside Alicia's gray costume and stood there for a moment, looking at the 2 futures laid out in front of her. One was what Alicia wanted her to be. Small. Ridiculous. Grateful for insult. The other was what Celeste Moreau had once seen. A woman no room had the right to diminish. Mara untied the old ribbon. The knot resisted at first, stiff with years. Then it loosened, and the lid opened. Black tissue paper whispered under her fingers. Beneath it lay the dress. For a moment, Mara forgot to breathe. It was black, but not the flat black of morning. It was the black of midnight water, the black of a grand piano under candlelight, the black of something deep enough to hold stars. When she lifted the bodice, tiny stones caught the weak bedroom lamp and scattered it across the walls. Not loud, not vulgar, just alive. The gown had been made from Italian silk and French lace, hand-shaped to move like smoke around the body. Along the neckline, black pearls had been sewn so finely that no thread could be seen. Across the waist, a pattern of tiny diamonds formed a constellation Celeste used to call the map of a woman who survived. Mara's throat tightened. She remembered the night Celeste had sketched it. Paris had been raining. The atelier windows were fogged from steam and breath. Mara had been working late, repairing a torn sleeve for a duchess who had never thanked anyone in her life. Celeste had stood behind her, watching. You make beauty and hide from it, the old woman said. Mara had laughed softly. Beauty is expensive, madam. Celeste shook her head. No. Attention is expensive. Beauty is what remains when they stop looking. Now, years later, Mara touched the gown and heard that voice again. Stand straighter. Her hands trembled only once as she removed the dress from the box. At the bottom lay the note. The same note she had read 100 times and avoided for 7 years. For Mara, because one day they will need to see what I saw. Below it, there was another line she had forgotten. Never wear this to impress them. Wear it when you are done disappearing. Mara sat down slowly. Outside her door, the mansion roared with preparation. Glasses clinked. Staff rushed past. Music swelled from the ballroom as the first guests arrived through the front entrance, wrapped in fur, diamonds, and entitlement. No one came to check on her. No one wondered if the joke was too cruel. That made the decision easier. Mara rose and moved to the small mirror hanging above the dresser. She took off the apron first, folded it carefully, then the black uniform. Piece by piece, she removed the costume of invisibility. She washed her face, smoothed oil through her curls, pinned them up with 2 pearl clips Celeste had given her on her last Christmas in Paris. She opened a small tin and touched a little color to her lips. Not too much, just enough to remind herself she had a mouth that could speak. Then she stepped into the dress. The silk slid over her skin like memory. For one terrifying second, Mara almost stepped out of it again. It felt too beautiful, too visible, too dangerous. Then she looked in the mirror, and the room changed. The narrow walls were still narrow. The lamp was still cheap. The floor still creaked beneath her feet. But Mara was not smaller than the room anymore. She stood taller, not because the dress was worth $4 million, but because for the first time in years, she saw herself without asking permission. A soft knock came at the door. Mara, it was Rosa, one of the kitchen girls. Mrs. Castellano says they're ready for you. Mara opened the door. Rosa stopped breathing. Her eyes filled with tears before she could hide them. Oh my God, she whispered. Mara gave her a small smile. Too much. Rosa shook her head. No, she said. Finally. From below, Alicia's voice rang out, bright and cruel. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest joining us tonight. Mara looked toward the hallway. The music faded. The trap was ready. So was she. The ballroom of the Castellano mansion had been built for people who wanted to feel eternal. Gold-framed mirrors stretched from floor to ceiling. Chandeliers spilled light over marble columns. White roses climbed the walls in careful arrangements that looked effortless only because 20 people had worked 6 hours to make them that way. By 9 o'clock, the room was full. Bankers with clean hands and dirty accounts. Politicians who smiled too much. Women in gowns sharp enough to wound. Men who had learned to laugh softly while making decisions that ruined lives. At the center of it all stood Alicia Castellano, glowing in champagne satin, one hand resting on a crystal flute, the other placed lightly on her husband's arm. Dante Castellano did not glow. He watched. That was what made people fear him. He was not the loudest man in the room. He never needed to be. Dressed in black, with his dark hair swept back and his expression carved from silence, Dante stood beneath the chandelier like a shadow the light could not remove. Alicia leaned toward a senator's wife and whispered something that made the woman laugh behind her diamonds. Dante heard only a piece of it. Our little surprise. His eyes shifted. Across the room, 2 of Alicia's friends kept glancing toward the back staircase. Their smiles were too eager, too mean, the kind of smiles people wore before. Someone else was pushed into shame. Dante's jaw tightened. He had seen cruelty in many forms. In alleys, in boardrooms, across negotiation tables where men smiled while signing betrayals. But he had always despised the casual kind most. The kind that needed an audience. His head of security, Luca, appeared beside him without being called. Boss, Luca murmured. You asked me to check. Dante did not look at him. And Mrs. Castellano gave the maid an old dress from storage. Staff says she invited her so the guests could laugh. The champagne glass in Alicia's hand caught the light. Dante's eyes stayed on his wife. Did Mara know? Luca hesitated. She accepted the invitation. Something unreadable crossed Dante's face. Not surprise. Recognition. In the 2 years Mara had worked in his house, Dante had noticed things he had never mentioned. The way she never slammed a door, even when Alicia deserved it. The way she remembered which flowers his mother used to like, and placed them in the chapel every Sunday without being asked. The way she carried herself with a quietness that was not weakness. He had not protected her. That truth settled in him like a stone. Alicia lifted her glass and tapped it with a silver spoon. The music softened. Guests turned. Everyone. Alicia called, her voice bright as cut glass. Before dinner, I wanted to do something special. As you know, my husband and I believe in generosity. Dante slowly turned his head toward her. Alicia did not notice. We have someone joining us tonight who works very hard behind the scenes. Someone who, I think, deserves one magical evening among people she would never normally meet. A few guests smiled politely. A few understood immediately and looked interested. Cruelty, when dressed as charity, often passed for entertainment. Alicia's friends moved closer together, already waiting to laugh. So please, Alicia said, extending one graceful hand toward the back staircase. Welcome our maid, Mara Ellis. The room shifted. Dozens of eyes turned toward the staircase. Dante did not move, but Lucas saw his hand tighten once at his side. At the top of the stairs, there was no one. Alicia's smile strained. For 3 seconds, silence gathered. Then footsteps sounded from the main entrance hall. Not the back staircase. The main hall. Slow. Measured. Certain. Every head turned. The double doors opened. And Mara Ellis stepped into the light. Alicia's smile died before anyone spoke. Mara Ellis stepped into the ballroom as if she had not been summoned to be laughed at. She entered as if the house had finally remembered her name. For one breath, no one moved. The chandeliers above her caught the black silk first. Light slid across the gown like moonlight over deep water, touching the hand-sewn lace at her shoulders, the black pearls along her neckline, the tiny diamonds scattered across the waist in a constellation too delicate to look accidental. The dress did not shout wealth. That made it more powerful. It whispered history. Mara stood at the entrance with her chin lifted, her curls pinned softly above her neck, her eyes steady beneath the golden light. She looked nothing like Alicia's joke. Nothing like the gray dress waiting folded in the servants' quarters. Nothing like the woman they had expected to pity or mock. A senator's wife lowered her champagne glass. A banker forgot the sentence he was saying. One of Alicia's friends let out a small, startled laugh, but it died the moment no one joined her. Alicia stared. At first, her face held confusion, then irritation, then something uglier as she realized the room was not laughing at Mara. It was looking at her. What is this? Alicia whispered. No one answered. Across the room, an elderly woman in emerald satin rose slowly from her chair. Her name was Vivian Laurent, a retired fashion curator whose approval could make collectors spend fortunes and whose silence could end careers. She took 3 steps forward, her eyes fixed on Mara's gown. That can't be, she said softly. Alicia snapped toward her. What can't be? Vivian did not look away from Mara. That dress. The room seemed to lean in. Vivian's voice grew quieter, which somehow made every word louder. It's Celeste Moreau's final piece. A murmur passed through the guests. Alicia's smile twitched. That's impossible. Celeste Moreau never released a final collection. No, Vivian said. She didn't. Because she died before the show. Her eyes moved across the handwork, the stones, the black pearls. But rumors said there was one last gown. A private piece. Never sold. Never worn. She looked at Mara now, not with suspicion, but with awe. It was valued at $4 million before anyone even knew where it was. The silence changed. Before it had been surprise. Now, it was shame trying to find somewhere to hide. Alicia's fingers tightened around her glass. You expect us to believe, she said, laughing too sharply, that my maid owns a $4 million dress. Mara looked at her. The old Mara might have lowered her eyes. This Mara did not. I don't expect you to believe anything, Mrs. Castellano, she said. You've always believed whatever made you feel taller. The sentence landed like a match in a room full of perfume. Alicia's face went pale. Dante Castellano had not moved since Mara entered. He had seen diamonds. He had seen royal jewelry locked in private vaults. He had seen women wear fortunes and still look empty. But this was different. Mara did not look expensive. She looked restored. And that realization cut him deeper than he expected because he understood something in that moment. She had been this woman all along. His house had simply treated her like she was less. Dante stepped forward. The crowd parted before him without thinking. His black suit made him look almost severe beside the shimmer of her gown. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak, far enough not to claim the moment as his. For once, the most powerful man in the room lowered his voice. "Mara," he said. Her eyes met his. He did not look at the dress. He looked at her. "You look exactly as you should have been treated." No one breathed. Not because he had complimented her, but because everyone understood what he had just condemned. Alicia let out a brittle laugh. "Oh, please. Are we really turning a costume into a sermon?" Dante turned his head slowly. The warmth vanished from his face. "Alicia," he said. One word. Her name became a warning, and the room went silent again. Alicia recovered the way cruel people often do. Quickly, she lifted her chin, smiled at the guests, and tried to pull the room back into her hands. "Well," she said, her voice light and false, "I suppose every house needs a little drama." Mara always did have a flair for attention. No one laughed. That was the first punishment. The absence of laughter. Alicia's eyes flashed, searching the room for support. Her friends looked away. The senator's wife suddenly found great interest in her bracelet. The banker took a sip of champagne with the focus of a man avoiding disaster. Mara stood still. That made Alicia angrier. "You were given something to wear," Alicia said, the sweetness gone now. "A perfectly appropriate dress. I was trying to include you." Mara tilted her head. "Include me?" "Yes," Alicia snapped. "But instead, you decided to make a spectacle." The word hung there. Spectacle. The very thing Alicia had planned. Dante's voice cut through the room. "Luca." His head of security stepped forward. "Yes, boss." "Play it." Alicia turned sharply. "Play what?" Dante did not answer her. Luca nodded to a technician near the sound booth. A second later, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly, and the large screen usually used for charity presentations flickered to life. Alicia's face appeared first. Not the polished version in champagne satin. The earlier version, standing outside Mara's small room with her friends behind her. The room watched as Alicia held up the ugly gray dress. "Wear this tonight. It will be adorable. Like Cinderella before the magic." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. The recording continued. Alicia's voice came through clear, sharp, and merciless. "Don't embarrass my husband by pretending you're something you're not." Mara lowered her eyes for the first time that evening. Not in shame. In memory. On the screen, Alicia leaned closer. "No dress can change what you are." The video stopped. The ballroom remained dark for 2 seconds after the screen went black. Those 2 seconds did more damage than shouting ever could. When the lights returned, Alicia looked smaller. Not poor. Not powerless. Just exposed. "That was private," she whispered. Dante's jaw tightened. "No," he said. "That was practiced." Alicia's lips parted. He stepped closer, but not enough to threaten. Dante did not need volume. His quietness did the work. "You didn't invite Mara to honor her. You invited her to humiliate her. You turned my home into a stage for cruelty and expected everyone to applaud." Alicia's eyes filled, but even her tears looked angry. It was a joke. Dante looked around the ballroom. "A joke requires humor," he said. "Cruelty only requires an audience." No one spoke. Mara felt every eye in the room turn toward Alicia, then toward themselves. That was the second punishment. Recognition. Not everyone had mocked her, but many had been ready to watch. Vivian Laurent stepped forward first. Her voice was low. "Mrs. Castellano, I spent 40 years in fashion. I've seen arrogance in every language. But tonight, you mistook a woman's uniform for her worth." Alicia flinched as if slapped. One of Alicia's friends whispered, "We didn't know it would go this far." Mara finally looked at her. "Yes," she said softly. "You did." The woman's mouth closed. Alicia turned to Dante, panic breaking through her pride. "Dante, please. You're embarrassing me." His answer came without hesitation. "No, you did that." The room went still. Dante removed Alicia's hand from his arm. Not roughly, not dramatically, just finally. Then he turned back to Mara. And for the first time since she had entered, someone gave her the choice no one else had given her that night. "Mara," he said, "do you want to leave this room?" Every face waited for her answer. Mara looked at the chandeliers, the guests, the woman who had tried to make her small. Then she looked at Dante. "No," she said. Her voice was calm. "I was invited." And with that, she walked farther into the ballroom. Not away from shame. Through it. Mara did not walk to the corner. She did not hide near the wall. She crossed the ballroom with the same quiet steps she had used for 2 years while carrying trays, folding linens, clearing plates, and disappearing before important people could feel inconvenienced by her presence. Only now, no one dared look away. The black dress moved around her like a shadow made of stars. Dante followed, but not too close. He understood something he should have understood long before. Dignity could be defended, but it could not be owned. If he stood in front of Mara, the room would see him as her shield. So he stood beside her instead. Equal distance from the light. Equal weight in the silence. Alicia remained near the staircase, her champagne satin suddenly looking thin, as if beauty without kindness had no structure beneath it. Dante turned to the guests. "There is something I need to correct," he said. His voice filled the room without rising. "For 2 years, many of you have come into this house and been served by this woman. She has poured your wine, taken your coats, cleaned rooms after you left them careless. She has heard your insults, your jokes, your assumptions." Several guests lowered their eyes. Dante continued, "And most of you never asked her name." Mara's throat tightened, but she kept her face steady. Dante looked at her briefly, asking permission without words. She gave the smallest nod. He turned back. "Her name is Mara Ellis." The name seemed to travel through the room differently now. Not as staff, not as decoration. As a person, Mara Ellis trained under Madame Celeste Moreau. She helped finish garments that half the women in this room would beg to wear. She supported her family with hands talented enough to create beauty, then strong enough to survive being ignored by people who should have known better. Alicia whispered, "Dante, stop." He did not look at her. No, the word was quiet. Final. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a folded document. Lucas stepped forward, placing a small table beside him as if this had been prepared the moment Dante understood what the night truly was. Dante laid the paper down. "Mara," he said, "this house owes you more than an apology. But an apology is where it begins." He looked at her fully. "I am sorry." The room seemed to hold its breath. Mara did not answer immediately. An apology from a man like Dante Castellano was not a small thing. But it also did not erase the mornings, the insults, the way she had learned to make herself quieter to survive under his roof. Finally, she said, "Thank you." Not forgiveness, not absolution, just acknowledgement. Dante accepted it as exactly what he deserved. Then he turned the document toward her. "This is an offer. Not charity, not payment for silence. An offer." Mara looked down. Her eyes moved over the words. Alicia strained to see. "What is that?" she demanded. Dante answered without looking at her. "The founding document for the Ellis House Initiative." A murmur passed through the room. "It will fund legal, housing, and career support for domestic workers who have been mistreated, underpaid, or erased by families like ours. Mara will direct it if she chooses. Full authority, full salary, full public credit." Mara's fingers hovered over the page. For the first time all night, her composure cracked. Not into tears, into breath. A breath she had been holding for years. Dante placed a pen beside the document, but did not push it toward her. "This choice is yours," he said. "Not mine." Mara looked at the pen, then at Alicia, then at the room full of people who had come expecting entertainment and instead found judgment. She picked up the pen, but before signing, she spoke. "I never needed a dress to be worth something." Her voice was soft, but every corner heard it. "I wore it tonight because some people only recognize value when it sparkles." Alicia looked down. Mara signed her name. Mara Ellis. The ink dried beneath the chandelier light. And the applause, when it finally came, started from the kitchen doorway. Rosa, then the butlers, then the servers, then, slowly, shamefully, the guests. Mara did not smile for them. She had not come to be approved. She had come to be seen. By midnight, the party no longer felt like a party. The music had returned, but softly, as if even the violins understood they were playing after a funeral for someone's pride. Guests moved carefully, voices lowered. Laughter, when it came, sounded polite and guilty. Alicia left before dessert. No announcement, no farewell, just the click of her heels across marble, growing smaller until a door closed somewhere deep in the mansion. No one followed her. Mara stood near the balcony doors, the signed document folded carefully in her hand. Beyond the glass, the city burned with 1,000 lights, each window holding a life no ballroom would ever fully understand. The dress still shimmered when she moved. But now people looked at her face first. That was the difference. Vivian Laurent approached quietly and stopped at a respectful distance. "Miss Ellis," she said. Mara turned. The title almost startled her. Vivian's eyes were wet, though her voice remained composed. "I knew Celeste. Not well, but enough to know she never gave beauty to anyone by accident." Mara touched the side of the gown. "She told me to wear it when I was done disappearing." Vivian smiled sadly. Then she chose perfectly. For a moment, the two women stood together in silence. One old enough to have seen the world repeat its cruelties, the other tired enough to know survival was not the same as peace. Then Vivian leaned closer. "When you are ready, the fashion world should know your name again." Mara looked toward the kitchen doorway, where Rosa and the other staff were pretending not to stare with proud eyes. "They will," Mara said. "But not just mine." Vivian understood. She nodded once and left her card on the table. A few minutes later, Dante stepped onto the balcony. He did not come close at first. The cold night air moved between them. "You could have told me," he said. Mara kept her eyes on the city. "Would you have listened?" The question was not cruel. That made it harder. Dante looked down. For a man who had built an empire on answers, he had none ready. "I should have," he said. "Yes," Mara replied. "You should have." The honesty stood between them like a third person. Dante nodded slowly. No defense. No excuse. Just the weight of a man finally seeing the damage his silence had allowed. After a while, he asked, "Why stay tonight?" After what she did. Mara looked back through the glass at the ballroom, at the chandeliers, at the people now speaking gently to staff they had ignored an hour earlier. "Because leaving would have made them comfortable," she said. "Staying made them remember." Dante followed her gaze. Inside, one of the guests thanked a server by name. Another helped pick up a dropped napkin instead of stepping over it. Small things. Not enough to fix the world, but enough to prove the room had been wounded in the right place. Mara unfolded Celeste's old note from inside the small hidden pocket of the gown. Dante saw the handwriting but did not try to read it. Mara read it aloud anyway. "For Mara, because one day they will need to see what I saw." Her voice softened. "She saw me before I knew how to see myself." Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "And now?" Mara folded the note again and placed it against her heart. "Now I see myself clearly." Below them, cars rolled through the gates. Guests left in silence, carrying home a story they would tell carefully, because no version made them look innocent. By morning, the city would hear about the maid in the $4 million dress. But that was not the real story. The real story was the woman who walked into a room built to mock her and refused to become small. Weeks later, the Ellis House Initiative opened its doors. The first plaque on the wall did not mention Dante Castellano. It did not mention Alicia. It read, "For every woman they called invisible, you were always here." And somewhere, in a photograph hung beside it, Mara Ellis stood in a simple black suit. No diamonds, no pearls, no borrowed light. Still radiant. Because dignity had never needed permission. And that night, the world remembered what dignity looks like.